Okay, so this is a special meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Just reading from the agenda, the first item on the agenda to amend the fiscal year 2018-19 tentative operating budget's total expenditures to $354,088,655. This represents a $950,000 increase to the tentative budget adopted by the Board of Estimate and Taxation on April 2, 2018. This additional $950 will be added to the expenditures for the Board of Education and the revenues for the use of fund balance in order to maintain the previously published average mill rate increase of 3.7%. The Board of Education's new appropriation will total $190,494,217, a $409,869 or 3.5% increase to its current year appropriation, and the use of the fund balance will increase to $2,950. First, we need to call the roll. Thank you.
Mayor Rilling?
Here.
Chairman Camacho?
Here.
Mr. Feigenbaum? Yes?
Yes.
Mr. Fryer?
Here.
Mr. Jellaret?
Here.
Mr. Kasimis?
Here.
Mr. Page?
Here.
7 present. You have a quorum.
So let's pretend that happened in reverse. Mr. Barron?
I'll move the item for discussion.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Barron.
We have two items on the agenda. The first is to change the tentative budget, which will be increasing the total expenditures by $950,000. Then once we do that, then we'll vote to make a request to the Common Council to amend the cap. But let's take first things first. The tentative budget, if you look at the third page of this document, you're just going to see what Ed just read. In the first horizontal yellow line, you'll see that the education budget has increased by $6.4 million or 3.5%. So their new appropriation is $190,494,217. And then if you drop to the bottom yellow line, what we've done is we've added $950,000 to the $2 million that we previously had for the transfer from fund balance. So we did increase expenses by $950,000, but we're increasing the draw from the fund balance by the same $950,000. And so that's what generates that middle yellow line. Unchanged average mill rate at 3.7% because we added the same amount of revenue as we did expense. So why are we asking for an increase of cap? The orange, light orange colored areas are the calculation of the cap. If you'll see the total expenditures now at $354,088,655. If you subtract the next horizontal orange line, which is the intergovernmental revenues of $16,969,000, you'll get an amended BET cap of $337,118,940. That's the bottom orange horizontal line. And as you can tell, that is $950,000 greater than what the council had approved on February 27th. And so what I did is right below that area at the very bottom, I just did a little bit of a reconciliation on how we arrived at that 950. You'll note that the city expenditures, I had originally proposed $1.4 million cut from all of the departments. Well, we cut an additional $456,000, about half from unallocated contingency and half from the police department because of the purchase of the tasers in this year. And so that helped offset the loss of the intergovernmental revenues of $456,000. But the action tonight is asking for an increase in Board of Ed expenditures of $950. Those three items together sum total the $950 that we have to increase.
Any discussion?
Question. First of all, I'd like to thank the mayor for working with the Board of Ed and getting this done. It's very important for the city, and I appreciate the effort that you put to get this where we are today.
Thank you.
Just want to know about where, now, the original Board of Ed request was 4.4 short, right? So they're going to go now with this addition, what are the shortfall going to be at the end of the day?
It's a good point, is that we started with a request of 9.9 million in the initial funding level, and the April 2nd tentative budget was 5.5. So we had the $4.4 million delta. Now, the city is appropriating an additional, or requesting an additional $950,000. And the agreement from the Board of Education is that they will reduce their fund balance, or eliminate the fund balance in their insurance fund, except for a small amount that has to be held for dental and vision that they're still paying self-insured insurance for. But the majority of the fund balance was for their medical insurance now that's fully insured. Now, of course, it's only an estimate, but they're anticipating that to be $1.1 million. So in my rough calculation, their estimate of $1.1 million plus our $950 is a little over $2 million, $2,050,000. We would hope that of the $4.4 million worth of requests, we would have a little more than $2 million of that no longer needed to be cut.
I would point out that at the conclusion of the workshop, Dr. Adamowski indicated that he needed $1.5 million to go forward with his strategic plan, and I think this will accomplish that.
Great.
I would just like to say that Bob's done a very good job in putting all these numbers together and working it out and giving us the different scenarios.
Bob Barron?
I think Bob Barron.
Okay.
And I think he showed a great great handle and knowledge of the numbers, and really knew what he was talking about, and I appreciate his insights in helping us identify where we can save money for the city and for the citizens. Having said that, I think that next year when we look at the Board of Ed budget, I would rather look at it in the line-by-line detail, like instead of what we did this year where we just took the previous year and just dropped that in. I would like to be able to take a look when we look at the budget next year and look at their request versus what they actually have spent and what they're asking for, so that we can see line by line where the increases and where the decreases are going. And the reason I say that is that in some cases the request that they put in was less than what they had, what we had put in, less than what they had the previous year. So there were some economies that they recognized, but when we started to just talk about big numbers, and we were talking about large sums and 4.4, 5.5, and you lose track of where you can get some specific savings.
Thanks for your comments, and I think that's a great idea. I know the Board of Ed was paired with a couple other departments. All departments come before the BET to represent their request, and I think with that suggestion, we'll just schedule them all by themselves, give them a dedicated evening to give this board a little more time to understand more at a line-by-line level. So we'll do that next year.
And that's a burden on you, I know, but I think it helped with transparency and to see where the increases are coming and what they're for.
I mean, I think we get that for all departments except for the Board of Ed typically. Is that
Right, and no, I mean, they, let's see, in December, the superintendent makes a recommendation. In January, the The full Board of Education approves what the request to the city is going to be. This year, they added $100,000. It was essentially what the superintendent had requested in December, and that information was available to all of us prior to them coming and meeting. So, but I can supplement their summary with a analysis line by line. We can do more to address that issue. I think that's a great idea.
It seems also like going forward, as we understand it, there's a $7 million increase in contractual obligations next year. That's what has been discussed. And there was only a $2.9 million increase this year in contractual obligations, so that it would be good to know this year what those $7 million are, what the source of that $7 million for next year is.
Right. I too am interested in that. If it was rounding up $3 million for this year, why have they been quoted as saying $7 million next year? I just haven't seen the detail, and I'm
Well,
sure
this is
I'm sure
part of
they
what-
will provide it.
This is
But
part of what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
is people start throwing $7 million and $4.4 million, and we're not seeing, they're not being transparent about it, not them. There is no transparency, whether it's us or them, we're not seeing that. And I think to your point, Ed, is that if we can see what the details are for the $7 million, maybe there's no conversation about it. Maybe it's something we have to live with. But without that, we don't know. The same thing with cutting guidance counselors. If there's going to be guidance counselors cut, there would be a line where it says guidance counselors being cut. And it would, it would get away from a lot of the inflammatory comments that we see that we make.
yeah, I'm looking forward to learning more about what they're. I mean, I'm sure it's all tentative now because it's more than a full year out. But we know that we funded some things that were supposed to produce cost reductions, right? I mean, we funded 2 of the 3 years of the Special Ed Redevelopment Fund, which was supposed to reduce cost in out-of-district placements. That'll be interesting to see those line items showing the reductions that were promised when this funding was requested. We also participated in moving the city over to the state's Connecticut Partnership Plan, CPP 2.0, and our savings were relatively modest compared to the savings that were forecast for the Board of Education, but we're also anxious to see those savings dialed into future budget requests. So I mean, there'll be a lot to look at when we go through the cycle next year for the 19-20 budget.
Plus, I guess the only place you could look is the fund balance for next year for additional funding. There doesn't seem to be any new revenues coming in anywhere, which is
Right,
not what we want to do, because it's going to be a tough budget next year with reval and every other doggone thing on there. This fund thing cannot just keep going. I mean, we're at a point where we're almost at a tipping point, I'm guessing.
Well, no, I'm glad you said that. I actually prepared it for the Common Council because I anticipated the question is, we finished with an unassigned fund balance as a percentage of our GAAP revenues. That's the ratio we look at 13.6% when we concluded last year, 16-17. With the increase in this year's budget and assuming that the fund balance stays the same, because we lost a lot of revenue from the state, but we have some increases in building permits like we talked about a couple meetings ago. Assuming that that's break even, that ratio drops to 13.3%. In my recommended budget, now remember my recommended budget was a base budget where it held Board of Ed flat, that ratio was 12.7%. When we agreed to add $950,000 to the $2 million draw, That brought the tentative budget down to 12, or that ratio down to 12.2%. But all in now, all of the concessions and commitments made on the city side, that means not only drawing the fund balance down by 2 million, but now 2,950,000, and also drawing it down for another 1,200,000 to fund the third year of the restructuring special education program. That brings the fund balance down at the end of 18-19 next year to 11.9%. So it does have an impact, and I think it's exactly what Jim just said, is that there comes a time, probably after next year, where you will not want to drop that fund balance any further.
And what are the top, I know you look at the top communities in the state for the AAA rating. What is that ratio comfortably to be?
Well, you have to wait till all the audits come in, and so I'm quoting a year old, but I think they were 12.2%. And I remember when I came to you, I said, listen, 12.7, it clearly is over the 12.2 median ratio for all AAAs.
Right.
And remember Doug Hempstead had said, well, what's the value of that 0.5%, 12.5 to 12.2, and it was about $1.8 million. Now drawing down 2,950,000 from the fund balance for next year's budget, but also pulling out the 1.2, we're dropping to 11.9.
Having said that, though, we do anticipate once the mall goes online that will increase our
grand list.
grand list.
Right.
So-
Our grand list should be going up.
Right, I think the estimates were $5 million in taxes. Remember that the mall isn't anticipated to start until October of 19, which is the next year, 19-20. So we won't get a full year of that $5 million, but that should be some incremental growth. And then each of the next 6 fiscal years, right? Because we have 7 years at that 50%. And it's estimated at $5 million, maybe more. I'm hoping there's good news in the near term for our grand list,
So
which
we
will
wanna
help
say-
mitigate some of this.
But we do want to stay above 12%.
Or whatever the median.
I
is.
would, yeah. Frankly, the median is our fund balance policy, but we've recently received from our financial analyst, a financial advisor, that the recent ratings actions that have specific language in there that tells him that they're looking for Connecticut municipalities to be increasing their fund balance, not drawing upon their fund balance. And the reason for that is AAA communities across the nation, they have this ratio between 30 and 35%. They've always given Connecticut a bit of a bye because our AAA, the 17 rated by Moody's, theirs are between 10 and 15%. And so why would they allow Connecticut to be less than half of what the rest of the nation is? And they said because we have the statutory authority to raise taxes without limits. So if we have an unanticipated event, we don't need a 30% reserve because we could just go to the taxpayers. We don't have any limits on that. However, Bill said with this in the fall when the governor issued his executive orders that threatened great cuts across Connecticut, no one talked about raising their taxes. What they talked about is taking from their reserves. And so Bill concluded that although we have the legislative authority to tax at will, how much we want, we may not have the legislative will to do so. And so that means that the rating agencies are going to be looking closer at this buy they've been giving Connecticut municipalities for all these years. And he believes that the language that he saw in 3 rating actions since January, he believes that they're calling for increased reserves if you still want to be rated AAA. So that was a very long answer to, do you want to stay around 12%? I want to stay around 12% because I'm very concerned. We're going to be issuing over $200 million worth of debt in the next 4 years. And being able to borrow that money at the very lowest interest rate possible because of our AAA credit rating is a top priority of the city.
And it means millions of dollars in savings here. And I'm guessing, based on everything I'm reading, we won't expect anything from Hartford in way of an increase. In fact, who knows what the hell we're gonna get, excuse me, what the heck we're gonna get up there.
Well,
But
yeah.
I just can't see that being a fallback anymore. I mean, it's so, anyhow.
I'd like to point out that it's almost 7 o'clock. We have to at some point vote and take whatever we decide down to the common council for them to consider our request. So if there's any other discussion, we continue, but mindful that we probably should be voting on this by 7 o'clock if possible.
We have 2 minutes.
So the first item is to increase the tentative budget to represent the $950,000 increase to the Board of Ed appropriation and the additional $950,000 draw from fund balance. That'll be item 1. That's been moved.
Okay, I moved the item. I have moved it.
All in favor of that item?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. The item is approved. The second item on the agenda is to request an increase of $950,000 to the fiscal year 2018-2019 operating budget cap established by the Common Council on February 27, 2018. The requested cap is $337,118,940 and will require the Common Council to adopt the resolution by a 2/3 affirmative vote of its entire membership, and the resolution is written in the agenda, is set forth in the agenda, and that is a resolution that the Common Council will need to adopt. I don't want to read the entire resolution, but it's all on your agendas at this point.
Actually, this will be the Common Council's resolution. It's
Right.
just showing
Okay.
because they didn't have it printed anywhere, because it wasn't an agenda item there. I thought I would put it here so it would make it
We don't have
easy
to
for
read it for the
John.
record.
Yeah.
So we're just, basically, the item is to request that the operating budget cap be increased by $950,000.
That's right.
So that's is there a motion in connection with that?
So,
Marty and Jim? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? And the motion carries.
Great, and then Linda's going to ask for your signature, Ed, and I think that's really nice. Dr. James Page had a class tonight, but thought it was important enough to physically be here to show the unified support. All 7 members voting affirmative on this action. That's really nice. Thank you all.
And thanks to the BET. Appreciate your patience in this, and appreciate a lot of the hard work that went into it. You have the meetings and the discussions and making sure that we came to a solution that will help the Board of Education continue their strategic operating plan, which I know we all support, and also not increase the anticipated mill rate increase of 3.7%, which was important as well. So, thank everybody for their hard work in getting this done.
See you upstairs.
And
We're
thank you.
going to scan
Thank you,
that
Bob.
document.
I think Jim has a motion.
Motion, was there?
Yeah, okay.